Esteemed President, Vice Chancellor, honorable panel members, and guests of honor, delegates, invited guests, members of faculty and staff, coordinators of the symposium, and my student colleagues. A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of you to the plenary session of the National Management Symposium, HR, with the theme Leaders Toolkit Integrity, Empathy, and Humility. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Smaraki Patnayak, Assistant Professor, ASBM University, will moderate this session. I now take the privilege of introducing the panel members of this session. Mr. Srinivas Reddy Vudimula is currently serving as the Chief People Officer at Bharat Financial Inclusion Limited, part of Indusland Bank Limited. He also heads the social impact initiatives at BFIL. Under his leadership, BFIL has made it to one of the top 50 companies to work for in India, consistently for the last 4 years. Prior to this, he held senior positions at ILNFS, Tavan Technologies, Dell International Services India Private Limited, Mahindra Satyam, and Godrej Group. Mr. Reddy holds a master's degree from the XLRI Jamshedpur and a bachelor's degree in Electronics and Telecommunications Engineering from Osmania University. We are grateful to you, sir, for your gracious presence. Dr. Jasmine Pandya Wood joined University of Nottingham, Malaysia in June 2020 as the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, where he is responsible for the strategic and operational leadership of schools spanning business, economic, education, politics, and international relations, media, and languages, applied psychology, and English. He is a member of the management board of the university and sits on the Senate of the University of Nottingham. Dr. Jason's research and teaching expertise is in social policy, with particular focus on how we govern through and intervene in the lives of individuals to resolve or mediate social problems, risk, and uncertainty. We thank you, sir, for agreeing to be with us in this symposium. Mr. C.D. Matthew has over 28 years of experience in HR functions. He is currently the head of HR for L&T Shipbuilding based at Chennai. He did his graduation with honors in commerce from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, and MBA in HR from Xavier's Institute of Social Sciences, Ranchi. He contributed substantially to the HR function in Tata Steel for 9 years. Then he went on to be the Vice President of HR in Jindal Steel and Power Limited before joining L&T. He is responsible for the entire gamut of HR activities at L&T Shipbuilding. We are obliged to you, sir, for your gracious presence. I now request the moderator, Dr. Mariki Patnaik, to deliver the opening remarks and then moderate the session.
Thank you, Shanvi. I again welcome all of you to the plenary session of the National Virtual Management Symposium of HR. Before we move forward, I'll just like to do a little housekeeping. I would request all the participants to please keep their audio and video off throughout the session to avoid any kind of disruption. And obviously, we would love to hear questions from our participants. So if there's any question during this session, you may please send them us to, through the chat box, and I'll bring them up once we are done with the deliberations. Thank you. Leaders help themselves and others to do the right things. They set the direction, they build an inspiring vision, and create something new. Leadership is about mapping out where you need to go to win as a team or an organization, and it is dynamic, exciting, and inspiring. Yet, while leaders set the direction, they must also use management skills to guide their people to the right destination in a very smooth and efficient way. While thinking about the definition of the term leader, it can be simply thought about a person who can see how things can be improved, has a vision, in fact has a clear vision and through a proper motivation is able to rally people towards the better vision. There are several definitions available everywhere, and you will often hear words like strategy, risk, integrity, passion, confidence, etc. This list is probably endless. While analyzing the concept, people fail to go beyond the transactional side of it. When you ask people to list what make the good leaders good, you hear people talk about the behavior or the style. But have you heard the words like integrity, empathy, and humility when you talk about leadership? Well, though we do listen about and we do talk about these things, but then in practice, it is maybe not uniformly practiced everywhere, hardly found in practice uniformly. So, in respect to the terms of today's symposium, starting with integrity, it's one of the most top attributes of a great leader. Integrity is the quality of being honest and having certain strong principles. A person with a deep commitment to do the right thing for the right reason, regardless of the situation, is what makes him or her a great leader. People who live with integrity are incapable of breaking the trust of those who have confided in them. Thus, it makes others to follow him or her. Empathy, on the other hand, means you are able to then apply that awareness of another's feelings and go beyond and understand how it affects their needs. When you are an empathetic leader, you are aware of how these feelings impact the other person's perception as well. You can appreciate what other person or people are going through when you display some kind of empathy. Empathy is a very critical skill for effective leadership, and one major reason is because of trust. With empathy, your team members and employees will always have their guards up. Without empathy, I mean. So they will always feel like they have to look out for their own emotional interest. While with an empathetic leader, things become easy. The employee, the team member knows that their feelings will never be simply overlooked or ignored. So leaders also have to be quite comfortable stepping back and letting others take the driver's seat when they are the experts. That's what we define as humility. This is in general what we understand of leadership in terms of integrity, empathy, and humility. I'm pretty sure once we listen to the discussions and deliberations made by our esteemed panel members, we shall get introduced to the nitty-gritties and different facets pertaining to leadership. With these few words, I would now request our first panel member, Mr. Srinivas Reddy, to go ahead with his deliberation. Sir, please. I would request Mr. Srinivas Reddy
Yeah.
to go ahead with his deliberation. Sir, are
Yeah.
you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Samarki. And of course, I want to thank my good friend Biswajeet Pattanayak for inviting me, and of course, my co-panelists who are there on the discussion today. Yeah, it's a wonderful topic. I think, it's apt, especially in the times when, um, it's extremely important for organizations to meet its numbers. And where is the place for integrity and humility, and then compassion, empathy, and compassion, right? um, COVID has something which has really brought and a kind of mirrored all of us in terms of what kind of workplace which is going to be emerging tomorrow. People's preferences have changed, right? It has brought in, it is kind of reset button for all of us in terms of what next is going to hold for us in terms of a new workplace. People, the younger lot, or the people who are going to be getting into the industry tomorrow, are going to be extremely choosy about the workplace which has these three critical qualities. And uh, so the organizations which kind of show the empathy and integrity, and high value of integrity and humility, are the places which people will choose, because they value the general younger generation will value these a lot more in days to come. What does it mean to a leader who is going to be, at the end of the day, the organization culture is purely dependent on what the leader sets, starting from the top. And why are these three things important, right? Beyond looking at a talent workplace and a preferred choice for the new talent to come into the organization. I believe integrity is nothing but it's an insurance which the organization and leader buys to make sure that nothing goes wrong. It's an insurance which you want when you're not there and people are carrying out their work. Setting a good high standard of integrity is extremely important to make sure that there is a consistency of value system in the organization. And I've always looked at one what I heard learned is that how do you assess what you're doing is right or wrong. I've been told a story saying that somebody went up and asked and said, "What is considered when I'm at crossroads? How do I decide what is the right thing to do?" Somebody said, "If this what you did has to appear on the front page, it's called a front page test, front page newspaper test, front page test. If it has to appear on the front page of a newspaper, will your mother be proud reading it, or will she be ashamed to even show it to another person?" I think that's extremely important, and that's something which talks about the basic fundamental values in ethics. And integrity is at the center of it. Coming to empathy and humility, yeah, if you as a leader are not empathetic, you only last so long, and you can't build teams, and people won't want to work with you. So empathy and is another thing which I believe is a ticket to entry. Integrity is also clearly a ticket to entry, and I personally believe the organizations which have stood testing times are the organizations which have a zero tolerance policy on integrity, and those organizations have seen growing from strength to strength, and also people wish to work. Humility, yes, I think uh, it's something which certainly is an organizational culture aspect, which is extremely important, and which kind of gives it makes the workplace more inclusive, right? While people will acknowledge the leader has the expertise, knowledge, and position, and power and authority, but I think being humble will actually make the workplace a lot more inclusive. And this is a trait which you'll also see in certain organizations. They grow, they're very big, very large, and high performing organizations. But when you touch these organizations, you'll find those organizations are very humble, right? You don't feel that they're so big, and they don't have the air of arrogance or anything around. I think that stems from one, the culture, and stems from what the leaders think is important for that organization. And those organizations where people will find it more inclusive, and they'll be happy to sit and thrive. And these are three critical things. Integrity, in my mind, is a ticket to entry, and I think organizations our leaders should adopt a zero tolerance policy. Empathy is a must, otherwise you'll walk over dead bodies. And humility will actually make you attract more and more people and make it more inclusive. That's where I end my initial talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, I agree completely with you, because generally we always go ahead and talk about numbers, profitability, profit maximization. That is what business houses also profess in general. But in order to sustain those big numbers and everything, workplace inclusion is very important. And which obviously from your talk also I could understand that how important it is to have. And with traits like this, empathy, humility, and being humble, it becomes easy for an organization to sustain the success that it has achieved. Thank you very much, sir. Moving forward, I would now request Professor Jason Pandya to please go ahead with his deliberation. Professor, please.
Thank you, Doctor. And Shrivnas, thank you very much for. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
I just want to say, Shrivnas, thank you for that inspiring start, because there were so many messages in one can align to and feel comfort in, and hearing that is a really good start to this conversation. Am I okay to maybe share a couple of slides with you? Is that all right?
Please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
you know, classic academic, you can't do anything without PowerPoint. So basically, can you see that okay?
Yes, it's visible to us. Please go ahead.
Brilliant. I was reflecting on the kind of question about leadership and the three headings that you tagged today's event around, integrity, humility, empathy. And it made me think about two kind of prominent leaders during the COVID-19 pandemic, and two figures that we'll all be probably familiar with from our CNN or global news. The first being Donald Trump, he needs no introduction. The second being Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand. And I was thinking about the sort of qualities that both of these leaders displayed during a period of time that could be characterized as very, very challenging, very uncertain, and COVID-19. So if I start with that, and then I'll come to my own reflections on the context where I work. It's no kind of understatement to say that Trump's a divisive figure, and nor should we just dismiss Trump as a leader that's not a very good leader, because don't forget that half of America voted for him in the recent election. So there's something clearly in Trump's leadership that people have looked to and found comfort in during these difficult times. But on the other side of it, Jacinda Ardern and her particular leadership style and the qualities that she embodies at the moment tend to display things that are completely the opposite of Trump, and have resulted in her being probably the most popular leader in New Zealand in 100 years. Trump is characterized, as we know, by being bombastic. His strategy is often unclear. He talks about taking on the enemy, fighting talk. It's very much about his own celebrity, his ego, positioning his self-achievements above all. He's definitely authentic. He says what he believes and what he feels. But with that comes a lack of emotional restraint. And we know that he's sustained by the very division that's kind of polarized America at the moment. Positioning people against each other works in his favor. But actually, as a consequence, at this time, the election may have been closely fought and contested, but he did lose his seat. He lost his presidency. Ardern, on the other hand, has been seen as a kind of remarkable leader during the COVID-19 period for the complete opposite set of qualities to Trump. Her strategy is concise, direct. She's very clear about what she wants to achieve and what measures need to be put in place, and she follows through with them. She's humble. She talks about the team effort. She routinely does in speeches, says thank you to my 5 million teammates, referring to New Zealand's population. She's accountable and shares her own fears and feelings, demonstrating a different level of authenticity. And if you go further back and look at the response to the Christchurch shootings, you see that big focus on unity, pulling together. Instead of focusing on groups being pitched against each other, she pulls the whole population together. And as a consequence, as I said, she's a leader in 100 years, high levels of trust and approval ratings. If I come closer to my own kind of experience, I joined the University of Nottingham in June last year. So spent my first 2 months working 6,500 miles away from Malaysia in the UK at my home there. So I was sort of in the UK context and then coming over to Malaysia to start my job and witnessing the sort of changes that COVID-19 were bringing with it to universities, and particularly how we had to adapt. So universities, like many other institutions, have obviously had to adapt rapidly to this changing landscape as a result of the pandemic. In Malaysia, this has meant a swift move to online teaching, learning and working from March 2020 to the present day. Most of my colleagues have not been on to campus since the start of the pandemic. So they have been working in these isolated environments for a very long time. Now, I know that many organizations have long practiced remote working, but actually for the academic culture of being amongst colleagues, amongst students, engaged in that sort of daily debate, that's been lost for a lot of people. So alongside that, we've seen variations of movement control orders, lockdowns, confining colleagues to homes. When I first arrived in Malaysia, I spent 2 weeks in a hotel room, unable to open the door I have two young kids. My daughters are 8 and 5, so you can only imagine how challenging that was, really. But it's removed us from the sort of physical workplace, and we're currently in a lockdown at the moment. There are challenges that come from that for well-being, for productivity, for our social connections, and there are blurred distinctions between the different aspects of our lives. Don't be surprised, delegates, if during this input, one of my two daughters comes into the meeting to ask a question about Lego, about dinner, or about anything really. So just be prepared if that happens. What has this meant for me as a university dean, as a leader, as a member of the senior management team? Well, the first thing is that we've had to adapt very quickly to things I actually have believed for a very long time anyway, but they've been tested and put to the test. The first is you have to signal and show and live high trust in your colleagues. When you're not in that culture of presenteeism, the clocking in at 9 AM and leaving at 5 PM, a lot of what we expect colleagues to do takes place within their own boundaries of work. Now, actually, the evidence suggests that that's having a really positive effect. So, for example, many of our colleagues, their research productivity in terms of the numbers of papers they produced last year has shot up. Many of our students are turning up to seminars online, whereas actually prior to the pandemic, it was really hard to motivate them to come to class. We know that actually pro-social modelling is really important. So acting, we talked about integrity, acting as we expect others to act. So if I expect people to turn up to meetings, I've got to turn up to them. I can't be late. If I expect people to produce particular work within timeframes, then I've got to deliver that as well. But that has to be balanced with recognising that this is an unusual time. There's an interplay between family, work, etc. And we have to respond to that. And part of that empathy strand is recognising that colleagues lead very different lives. I am blessed to have the kind of setup here that enables me to sit upstairs and do my work. But some colleagues are working on sofas in the front room off a laptop with kids running around, trying to balance homeschooling. And being able to respond to that is really important. We also have to respond quickly to emerging crises. And that means testing the limits of our policies, of our organisational culture, and being willing to flex these. So, for example, in Malaysia at the university, we took a kind of a standard line because it's so difficult to travel. We told our international staff members who are used to travelling once a year home that during this period they just can't do it. They cannot travel because actually bringing them back into the country is really unpredictable. But what we didn't anticipate is a year later, some people would be experiencing real hardship as a result of that. Struggling, for example, with family members in distress back home, or older people who need care and need help. So in this context, it's about being much more adaptable and flexible and supporting our colleagues as best as we can. And that, in this case, meant a colleague home and enabling them to take a period of leave or to work remotely from their home country. We also need to recognise, reflect and respond to a constantly shifting context. Our Malaysian government routinely changes policy once a week or issues edicts that are quite difficult to follow. But crucially for our staff, communicating these openly, quickly and regularly to our staff, keeping those channels open is really important. Now, I know I've been talking a lot, so I'm just going to conclude with one last slide, which is we know that leadership kind of is important in terms of the context we're in. The kinds of styles we see in leaders reflect the period of history. Now, in British history, I always look to World War II as one of those moments. So we hold up Winston Churchill as a sort of classic British leader, the British bulldog spirit. And during the war, that was crucial. After the war, Winston Churchill lost the next election and in fact became one of the most unpopular prime ministers. And indeed, before the Second World War, didn't have a great track record in government. His close follow-up was Clem Attlee, a quiet, reserved, empathetic man, described as sort of a whisper, but actually went on to do some major reforms to the British welfare system because he recognised that you needed a different type of government during peacetime. So we know that context shapes leaders. What I'm kind of hoping for is that the kinds of qualities we've seen that have come to the fore during this pandemic, the Ardens of the world rather than the Trumps of the world, the kinds of qualities we've seen shouldn't be just seen as moments in time, that we build on those after the pandemic, that we begin to think about and model our organizations differently. As Shiva said in his kind of opening speech, you know, people are going to choose to work for organizations that embody these values, that live these values, because that's what's more likely to contribute to the development and health of an organization, and certainly the development and health of me as a person working within it. So thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen now and hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Professor Jason. And as a professor does, he gives examples. So the two familiar figures that you talked about, be it Mr. Trump or Miss Arden, you know, vis-a-vis, these both are leaders, but they have contrasting personalities, as you also projected through your slide. It shows, you know, division versus unity, and ego versus being humble. So that's the personality which takes people further in their lives. Again, linking our theme to the COVID situation, wherein you talked about how in situations, in difficult situations, challenging situations like we are current now, in the current situation, how is it important for a leader to be, you know, be empathetic, to understand that the situation is difficult and to empathize with people, to have little flexible policies and all of those things. So thank you very much for putting all those things in a very concise manner for all of us. Moving forward, I would now request Mr. C.D. Matthew to please go ahead with his deliberation. Sir, please.
Am I audible everywhere? All those
Yes, sir.
For the webinar today?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Oh, great. I think we bring in over about the three panelists over here, bring in about some 70 to 80 years of experience as leaders, maybe in the manufacturing sector or in the academics. But yes, actually, when we talk about leader, a leader has to be a role model. And when we say role model, that means he's all encompassing. You know, he has all the attributes that make him a role model. I remember my first day of orientation way back about 28 years back, when I joined a company called Tata Steel. And we were told, in fact, speak with honesty, think with sincerity, and act with integrity. I think such a wonderful sentence or a punchline which was given to us. I always carry that in my mind, because it is so very important that it is integrity, empathy, and humility is very important. But a leader with his fathomless years of experience carries in his bag many more toolkits along with this integrity, humility, and empathy. And we say that speak with honesty and think with sincerity and act with integrity. I feel that if your action inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you become a leader. And that is what actually makes one as a role model. Leaders do not invite you on a journey. They take you on a journey, they show you a way. And a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And how can you show the way? You can show the way only when you have that conviction, when you have that commitment, you have that dedication, you have the knowledge, you have the wherewithal, you have the nuances. Otherwise, you will get lost on the way. So it is very important for a leader to know the way, go the way, and show the way. And hence, I feel that a leader has to have that empathy to understand. It is not only during the pandemic that we are talking about. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It talks about seek first to understand than to be understood. That is to say, you have to first place yourself in the shoes of the other, and then only you'll be able to understand the problems of the people. When we talk about integrity, when we talk about humility, these are very important. Uh, Humility, it says that with pride comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. I have seen many leaders who are so very humble. They have achieved greater positions in the life, but humble leaders are great listeners. And humility, many a times it is considered that a great leader or a humble leader is actually a weak person. It should not be misunderstood. Humility should not be misunderstood as weakness. It is a sign of strength. Along with this, I think one has to be a creator, a collaborator, a communicator, and a critical thinker. When you have all these, it is then that you become a leader par excellence. Otherwise, I think there is somewhere that we are missing and we fail to stand as a role model in our leadership journey. Um, I am aware of a small story which I would like to share, and many of you would have heard about this the story of a giant ship which broke down. And this ship which broke down, the owners invited many experts actually to come forward and help them to get the engine back into action. The ship owners tried one professional after another, but none of them could figure out how to fix the broken engine. Then they brought in a man who had been fixing ships since he was young. He carried a large bag of tools with him, and when he arrived, immediately he went to work. He inspected the engine very carefully, top to bottom. Now, two of the ship owners were watching this, hoping he would know what to do. After looking things over, the old man reached into his bag and pulled out a small hammer. Now, he had so many tools in hand. He had so many tools in his bag, but he only pulled out a small hammer. He gently tapped something, and instantly the engine lurched into life. He carefully put his hammer away, and the engine was fixed. He goes back home. A week later, the owners received an invoice from the old man of $10,000. When the owners received the invoice of $10,000, they were all aghast. They were surprised. There was nothing that this old man did, and he is charging us $10,000. So they wrote to him and asked him to send the itemized invoice. The man sent an invoice that read, and I want you all to hear this. This is very important. Tapping with the hammer, $2. Knowing where to tap, $9,998. The crux of the story, in sum and substance, the point that is being driven over here is effort is important, but experience and knowing where to direct that effort makes all the difference. I think when we are talking about integrity, empathy, humility, and when we are actually associated with organizations, when we are associated with academics, whether we are in the educational institutions, we mean to say that we have to stand as a role model for others to emulate. And along with the other attributes of a leader, empathy, integrity, and humility is considered as some of the important toolkits of a leader. And I think I would put my point to rest over here and wait for the other members to actually articulate their views.
Thank you, sir. And as beautifully you've presented, you have told that it's everything that encompasses, all the attributes are encompassed in a role model. So a leader has to be a role model first. And there were a lot of phrases that you used, and one of them I picked up. I liked it very much, which was a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Of course, if you have not walked the path, you cannot show the path. So that is the essence of it. A leader has to first go through it. He has to know to show people how to do it. And obviously, as you said, that the story that you narrated, that you need to, even if you have to put in efforts. Even if you have the experience, you have to have a direction to the experience also. Thank you very much for for your deliberation, and beautifully talking about the concept of leadership and encompassing all those attributes that we have in our theme. Now, we would like to take few questions from our participants. If any participant has any questions, please send them to us through the chat box. Meanwhile, I can also put forward a question. I can say that maybe to Matthew sir only. Sir, in general, absence of humility, it is perceived as ego, and presence sometimes is perceived as a weakness. How do you look at that? Please comment on that.
No, I never, I don't think, people might perceive it as ego, or people might perceive it as humility, but it is always said that the tree which bears the fruit always, hangs low. The tree which bears the fruit will always hang low. And that is to say, when you are an accomplished leader, you will always be humble. That arrogance will not be there, because you know in the absence of arrogance, then only you will be able to understand and take people. You will be acting like a mentor, you will be acting like a coach, you will be acting like a communicator. And then, like, I feel that leader is not one who actually enjoys big power. Leaders become great not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower. That's very important. And that empowerment comes, somebody is modest, somebody is humble. And humility comes only when an individual is accomplished. He has, achieved excellence in life through the grit and determination, the conviction and commitment and perseverance and dedication. He's able to understand the people, to take them along. As I said, leaders don't force people to, follow. They take them on a journey, and the journey can only be complete when you know the way and go the way and then show the way. So humility is very important. It should not be misunderstood as weakness. It should not be misunderstood as arrogance.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. There's another question from Ankit. He says that how do you monitor the performance of the people that you have to lead? Shridi sir, would you like to comment on this question?
How do you monitor the performance you are going to lead?
How do you monitor the performance of the people that you have to lead?
Okay. Yeah. So, performance, let me say this, right? Performance has two aspects, right? One is what, and another is how. Okay. What the person has achieved, right? In terms of numbers. If somebody need to make X number of sales, then has he achieved those numbers or not? So that's something which says what the individual has achieved. Another critical important aspect is how the person has gone about achieving it, right? Like Professor Jason has said, right? Trump also has got a popular number in terms of voters backing him. But the how part of it is what we are ending up discussing here, right? So it's extremely important for the leader to assess not just what or over impressed with what, but also has to figure out a way of defining how the person has gone about achieving. Has the person followed the value system? Has the person taken a shortcut or other stuff? This is like this, especially the students who are there on the meet today. It's about assessing a student's performance while the typical academics assess marks scored in the exam. But I think extremely important for somebody to peek and have a look at it. How did he score those marks? Is it by his own effort, or has he got some? we take a shortcut and various other things. I'm sure the student community does not look up to those people who have taken a shortcut and achieved those. They look down upon those people. Similarly, in the corporate world also, it's extremely important not to just look at what that has been achieved, but it's exactly important for you to look at how the person has gone about achieving.
So drawing from Ankit's question, I'm curious, like, how do we go about developing and also demonstrating empathy without compromising on the performance outcomes and output? Because numbers are important for a business unit, but how do we go about not compromising on the empathy part of it also?
So empathy does not mean you have to overlook or you have to be overly accommodative or sympathetic to an individual, right? Empathy is your ability to put yourself in the shoes of the other individual and feel and able to take those constraints into consideration when you make a decision, right? It does not say you condone non-performance or condone things. It never says that. Somebody jumps a signal, you be empathetic to that individual why that person has jumped the signal. But if you don't think if for the mistake or something you have done, you have to go about doing it, right? So it's simple as that. So you want to be empathetic because everybody, all of us, expect other individual to understand us. The other individual understanding you is empathy. Empathy is not being accommodative for the shortcomings in the other individuals. I want Professor and also Matthew to add. Matthew is raising
Yeah.
his hand, so he wants to speak.
Can I just add a couple of points here?
Please, sir,
There
please.
are two aspects to it. When you say how do you assess the performance? Okay, so we have a very robust, like in an organization or in an institution, you have the performance management system where you have, the yardsticks of measuring the performance of an individual. But if I have to take my example, if I, as a leader, how do I assess the performance and potential of the people? See, like it is more about nurturing, grooming, and guiding, and counseling and coaching. If I have a couple of people working under me, and if I want to delegate, I have first to groom them up. And when I am grooming, I then become a coach and a counsel and a mentor to him. And I want to chisel him the way I want him to, be. I want him to be like leaders, they create more leaders and not followers. I don't want my team to be a follower of mine forever. I want them to become leader, and to make them a leader, I will have to chisel them out. I have to groom and impart such learnings in them that they become better professionals. And in doing that, I will be only honing their leadership capabilities and abilities. And I'm sure when I'm consciously grooming these people, when I'm nurturing these people, I'll be able to actually make them effective leaders. And that's how the performance of the individual, me as a leader, would actually be carrying them along with me. So there are two aspects to the performance management or the performance assessment. One is the actual robust performance management system that you have in an organization, and the other is the individual's own charisma by which he drives his people to follow his path and make them and enable them and help them to become better leaders.
Right, sir. Professor Jason, would you like to add something to what Sir said? What's your point of view on this?
Yeah, I thought those two comments were really, they're really sound. Because for me, I think there's a bit of mythology, actually. The myth that somehow empathy is in opposition to performance. And actually, I think, in my experience, the more empathy that's on the display, the better performance management goes on. So actually, if you create a culture where it's extremely hierarchical, where the relationship between leaders and followers is one beset by sort of a very unhealthy power dynamic, then what happens is you get a low trust culture. And you actually get elements of bad performance, and it becomes really hard to monitor performance. So if colleagues are experiencing difficulties and they don't feel like they can approach the leader who adopts that autocratic style, then all you end up with is all sorts of problems underneath, which then infects, not just the integrity of the individual, but the integrity of the organization. So I think there's something about reframing empathy as one of the things that is likely to drive performance. So, there's a couple of questions in the chat bar which are about, people who are humble are often the people who are trodden on, and there's no denying it. Some of that goes on, but actually, my experience is that if people rally behind these things, you begin to see people adopt that behaviour. I really like the sort of comment from T. Matthew just now about sort of thinking that if you're going to nurture followers, you want to be able to not just bring out the leadership talent within them, but for them to embody the sorts of leadership characteristics that you value. So, and that in turn then has a ripple effect in terms of performance management.
Right. There's another question from Mr. Ayan. He says, please justify this quotation that great business leaders create a vision, passionately own the vision, and relentlessly drive it to completion. Any one of you, if you wish to comment on this particular quote.
Yeah, actually, I feel that what he has asked is very correct. That a leader has to be a visionary. He has to be futuristic. He has to, drive the organization or the business, and for that he has to dream. Okay, and without this, I think it will not be appropriate for him to lead the organization. Professor Jason.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think in the quote, there's a line that's missing for me, which is, so great business leaders create a vision, passionately own the vision, bring people behind the vision. And that's the bit. So I've worked with leaders who have their vision, they wake up every day, they've set this idea and relentlessly drive it to completion. And actually, on that relentless drive, casualties are strewn left and right. And those casualties might be people who have kind of come on the wrong side of the vision. More often than not, actually, it's down to people not being communicated, not understanding what the goal of that organization is, not able to get behind it. And I think certainly if we're talking about humility, about integrity, empathy, you can have that charisma and drive, which is so essential to leadership. But bringing people along with you is critical to the sustainability of it. Too many visions are houses of cards, aren't they? You sort of build them up, and as soon as you take that leader out of the picture, it all comes tumbling down. And that's another kind of call for why we need people to come behind it.
Right. There's another question. The most humble ones are exploited often. So how does a leader balance between staying humble and also maintaining a strong image? Srini sir, would you like to take this question?
So once again, it's a misnomer. Humble is not meek. I just want everybody to accept that, right? Like Professor said, it's actually a strength, right? Being powerful, being competent, and being humble is actually a courage and a strength. So don't mistake humbleness with meekness. Humbleness is your ability to accept everybody and everything which comes your way in its entirety, right? So humbleness is nothing but you're able to make it more inclusive. You're able to accept people of all walks of life. You're not bringing your position, your stature to the discussions which you have. When you are in a room, you will realize when you start working in organizations that when you are in a room, when you sincerely sit and seek feedback, okay, and feedback is extremely important for a leader to be able to. That's like his dashboard when he's driving the car, and you want a good dashboard. You don't want a bad dashboard. And if you're going to ask your dashboard, "Am I driving fine?" and you want a car to give you exactly how the car is performing, right? If you're not humble enough, people are not going to speak up, right? So you just make sure you're humble so that you disarm other people. And when you disarm other people, they will have genuine interest in your progress and they will be speaking to you, right? Not being humble is going to be detrimental to you. While it drives people away, that's a secondary. But as a leader, you do want to hear, because extremely important for you to get a feedback. The feedback loop has to work for you to be able to succeed. And being humble, being empathetic are the two qualities which will help you actually be able to get that amount of acceptance from all of you. I would
Right,
like
sir.
to see Matthew to add.
Sir, there is another direct question to Matthew, sir, also. I can see another question from Mr. Sanjay. He is asking question for Matthew, sir. What is the vision of a leader in the current pandemic situation for its employees with respect to PMS, performance management system, and company goals? Matthew, sir.
Uh, uh, I think I should give you the example of L&T actually has been doing during these trying times, the pandemic situation. Um, we have enabled people to work from home, and we have not only enabled our employees to work from home, we have also uh, worked tirelessly in you know providing accommodation for our workers, providing them meal facility, providing them the medical facilities. And all this was aimed at, one, that we have to take care of our employees because of the empathy that we have, because of the values that we and the ethos of our organization, and two, to achieve the company's objectives and goals. So the company, besides spending huge sums of money in in taking care of the our own employees and the workers also, we have been able to drive performance in the within the organization. In fact, we have been able to perform, should I say, a little more than what would have happened otherwise. During the pandemic situation, because the availability of the workers was ensured, because we kept them in our campus, in our colony, in the workers Shramik Vihar. So we were able to take care of that. So when we say that, how do you achieve the company's goals? The company knows as to how to create an environment of excellence and how to create an environment of performance. And for that, we have a lot of enablers via which we have been able to achieve this. Whether we talk about the facilities of accommodation, about the bus facility, the transport facility, all this total in totality actually has helped us achieve the organizational objectives.
Right, sir. There's another question here. How would leaders go about getting cohesion among a team who disagrees?
Is it to me?
So
Yeah.
anyone, if you feel like taking it.
So how does the leader go about dealing with the people, build a cohesion where people disagree?
So generally, she's asking. What I assume here is she's asking how to get cohesion if a particular team is, it's not united. If there is disagreeing, then how do you bring about cohesion?
Disagreeing.
If there is a lot of disagreement between the members of the team, how do you build a cohesion among them? That's what she's asking, I think.
I think, Srini, if I can answer and support you in this, developing cohesion, and especially with regard to teams when they are in conflict or in disagreement, it is all about the charisma of the leader, which actually helps to dissolve or demolish the disagreement or the dissent. One thing is important to understand, that in an organization, dissent is the voice of progress. If at all people are actually getting into a disagreement, it is it should be a dissent, but it should not be acrimonious. If it is acrimonious, then the leader has to pitch in to understand and make them understand that this is not in the interest of the organization. And that's why a lot of organizations, including my organization, works towards building teams. And when we talk about building teams, we talk about infusing in a lot of these qualities of mutual respect, a respect for each every individual, his views, and then only we will be able to create cohesion in the organization. And obviously, when there is a conflict and it carries on, and somebody does not agree for some reasons beyond certain point, then the leader has to take some other recourse to bring that person into agreement with of the team. Otherwise, I think teamwork, team excellence is a culture in the organization, and that culture in the organization makes that organization a great place to work. And this is why we call an organization a great place to work. An organization is not made of bricks and stones. It is built up with human resources of the organization, the employees of the organization, the management of that organization. It is that which creates a culture of excellence, and through that culture of excellence, team cohesion is also becomes as a culture.
Right, sir. Um,
Yeah.
Sir, would you like to add anything to what sir said?
Only to endorse what Sidi Matthew said, and in terms of dissent being a really critical part of organisational progress, because actually the best ideas tend to come from the left field. What I would say is as well that there's something about how we embody ourselves as leaders. So if we set a culture where we want to hear difference, where we want to hear lots of different views, if we want people to shape, for example, when I first arrived at the university, setting out my 5-year vision as classic leaders do, part of the process of that was getting as many people feeding into that vision from the start. So if it's normal and expected that dialogue and engagement with each other is a normal part of process, then it doesn't become as conflictual. It doesn't become unusual for people to voice an opinion. It becomes quite normal. Rupali made a really interesting point in her question, the second bit of it, which just connects to this, which is can you describe a time leader took a leadership position when leader didn't have the title of leader? And I'd point Rupali, if she can, have a look at something called broad-based community organizing. I'll write this in the chat. And initially, you'll be thinking, what's the link between community organizing in Chicago and other communities and leadership? And actually, one of the big focus of community organizing is about developing relational leaders. They start with the principle that a leader is someone who has a following. That's not necessarily someone who holds a title like dean or managing director or CEO. A leader is someone, and that person can be someone who has a room full of students in front of them, or someone who sits within a team that people look to. And as soon as we begin to accept that actually more of us are leaders than not, it becomes easier to embody a culture of what we would call relational leadership. But I'll post something about that in the chat, so colleagues can kind of have a look at it if they're interested in finding out more.
Right. We would just take another last question. It's from Swagatika. She is asking, often we go into micromanaging our teams in the name of performance measurement. Is not that affecting a person's way of accomplishing a task?
Very much. Very much.
So that's actually a classic case of people. There's one great stuff which goes around saying that you have to be hands-on, right? Hands-on management, right? So people say you have to be very hands-on. That gets actually people misinterpret that with micromanaging things, right? Hands-on does not mean that you have to know every moment, everything what individuals are doing. I think it just says that you know exactly what's happening at any point of the time. So yeah, micromanaging is bad. You have to respect the moment you actually have somebody in your team. First fundamental thing of a relationship is trust. You should trust that that individual has good intentions and wants to come to the organization or to work and contribute their best. And your job as a leader is only going to be enabling them to be able to perform better, right? It's like, imagine a cricket game, right? The captain has to trust every player. right? And once the player goes on the pitch to bat, he has to just believe that the player is in the best interest of the team and he's going to do, he or she's going to do that, right? At every second ball or over, he can't send one extra person and give him instructions and say, no, do this, do this, do that. That cannot work, right? The moment the person is in the team, the captain is expected to trust that individual to be in the best interest. Micromanaging has very, very, I will say, negative side effects. But I still, at the same time, it's important for the leader to able to create an environment where if somebody is in need of help or guidance, they should be able to come up and speak. Okay, and so he has to provide an enabling environment to be able to have people come up and speak. And everybody in the team may not of the same caliber and may not be of the same competency level. It's possible that if you have a team of 10 people reporting into you, there could be few who are extremely independent, able to do things on their own. There could be few who require certain amount of a guidance. So the leader has to figure out how your five fingers in the hand are different, and they should have a different strategy towards in terms of coaching and mentoring those folks. But micromanaging is certainly is not something which, if we, they say this, right? So don't do what you don't like others to do to you. So if you don't like micromanaging, don't micromanage your team. So that's what my advice is going to be. Sorry, Matthew, you're saying something.
No,
Matthew,
I think
sir, your comments.
Srinivas, Marika, I just add to what supplement to what Srini has just said. I think micromanaging also happens, in the absence of good nurturing. If you are nurturing, if you are, coaching, mentoring, counseling your team members, then you have that confidence. You develop that trust. As Srini has rightly said, trust is an important factor when you will be able to delegate. To delegate, I'll have to first, coach, guide, nurture, and sustain that, performance of the individual, and then only I'll be able to delegate. And when you know that you can trust somebody, then you will definitely not be able. You will, refrain from micromanaging. You will give the liberty, the authority, the freedom, the opportunity to your subordinate to work with you, and you will balcony view and then see how the individual is doing. I think if that is done, the need for micromanaging does not, is not required.
Professor Jason, would you like to comment anything on this particular thing?
Yeah, just a few years ago, I was working with a children's department at a city council, a local authority, and they gave every single social worker a card, and it was about this big, and it fit in your wallet, and it just said, "Is what you're planning to do going to hurt a child? Yes, no. No. Will it cost the council money? Yes, no. No. If you got the two no's, or will it harm our reputation or whatever? Yes, no. Do it." And then everybody had that in their wallet, and they just knew that that was a signal of trust from senior management that you can go ahead and make an impact. I completely endorse that. The notion of high trust culture is really important. Now, actually, I work in the university sector, which over the last probably 20 years, ASBM will know this, we've got more and more metric driven, more and more KPI driven, and actually the danger of that is that you can become so focused on that that you begin to micromanage. But the best results, as I said at the start, come from that high trust, that high belief in people being able to generally do the right thing. Very few people are nefarious, very, very few come to work with the intention of being, difficult people.
So I would just like to give my concluding remarks, and I will just try to sum up all the discussions that we had on the theme of the symposium today. In brief, I can just say that there are a lot of organizations, there are plenty of organizations, with seemingly endless supply of the technical know-how, and they also have years of experience, which, but then they sometimes still continue to struggle. And I believe it is because they lack the traits like, whatever we have discussed. And in terms of, even Matthew sir said, the role model concept, which encompasses all the attributes. So when we are forgetting some of it, we tend to struggle. So we also have various burning examples of various types of organizational failures, be it your Enron, be it your Satyam, be it your Kingfisher. They have amply demonstrated the unethical business practices, and they have actually questioned the very existence of sustainability. So therefore, these ingredients of a leader, though they are age old, still they are very much relevant for a person to be an effective leader, and to go ahead and take the organization to the height of excellence. Again, drawing from the example of Tata, Matthews was telling in his deliberation also. Let us take the example of Tata's also. Mr. Ratan Tata is a shining example of of business leadership. He is widely respected for achieving outstanding results during his tenure. But then he also, though he took on great challenges, and he turned Tata Holdings into one of the most successful entities in global business. But beyond these results, also there are perhaps more important reasons to admire him as a leader and him as a person, as an individual. So I know in Tata there's a common thread that people share: the strong values. They have integrity of a high order, and they're very forceful to social conscientiousness in terms of what their corporations do. Again, in addition, they are quite warm, thoughtful, and caring human beings. So, which shows the importance of a value-based culture, values, and ethics. So, as a concluding remark, I can just say that a toolkit which entails integrity, empathy, and humility, along with other traits, of course, is going to recognize the importance of both the leadership and management, and it seeks to provide a source of support to all those who have responsibility towards others. So in short, concentrating and building and engaging on these crucial traits, and moving beyond the transactional sets of values pertaining to a good leader, can help an organization build a team that runs like a well-oiled machine. That's all from my side. Over to you, Shanmi.
It is
Shani?
my privilege. Yes, ma'am.
Continue.
It is my privilege now to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of ASBM University and the entire fraternity of the institution, has extend hearty thanks to the panel members, Mr. Srinivas Reddy Vudumala, Professor Jason Pandya Wood, and Mr. C.D. Matthew for gracing this session and providing insightful inputs. I also convey our gratitude to the guests of our morning session, Professor Vipin Gupta, Mr. Sudhakar Pai, Mr. Bijay Kumar Patnaik, and Mr. Sunant Sharma for providing valuable input. I convey my thanks to the moderator, Dr. Smariki Patnaik, for efficiently initiating the discussion and paving the way for the effective conduct of the session. Lastly, I extend sincere thanks to the President, Vice Chancellor, my faculty members, members of the staff, the coordinators of the symposium, and the student colleagues for their enormous cooperation in organizing this symposium. National Management Symposium on Mark Logistics will be held on 20th February 2020. All the participants are requested to join the symposium. Jai Hind.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
I need to thank Professor Patnayak for inviting me and having me over in this panel discussion. I do convey my sincere gratitude and my good wishes to the university for the future endeavors.
Thank you very much, sir.
Professor Jason, it was a pleasure meeting you, and Mr. Srinivasan, it was really nice having you and listening to you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Professor. Pleasure connecting up with you. Wonderful, and you took the pains of bringing up a presentation, which is awesome, and and colorful people on that. We can't forget them. And yeah, please convey our regards to the president of the university, Dr. Samarki Patnayak, and of course the whole student fraternity for pulling off a great, wonderful one. Pleasure speaking to you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you very much indeed. It was a pleasure to be invited, and more a pleasure to be amongst this distinguished group of people. I've really enjoyed the discussion. I've enjoyed the questions that have come in. It's got me thinking, and on a Saturday evening in Malaysia, getting thinking is a good thing. So thank you very much, and my very best wishes to all the staff, the president, the faculty and students for the university. Look forward to another opportunity in the future.
Thank you, Professor Jason.
Shall we leave?
Yeah, please, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.